Well, Pick n Pay has joined the likes of Woolworths in offering its customers the option to buy food on credit. Shoppers who qualify will be selected through the supermarket's Smart Shopper Card program. But debt counsellors are sounding the alarm bells after this news, saying it is a trap. Let's find out how from Debt Rescue CEO Neil Roots as to whether this is a trap or it's something that you can work with. Neil, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning. Your thoughts on this? Good idea, bad idea?
Very bad idea. The reality is that you cannot offer consumers to finance their living essential goods, basically like food, and it comes down to people who are already so over indebted that they need to finance food. Now, if that happens, alarm bells should go off and tell you that that person is over indebted. And the reality is that there is help out there in South Africa for people who are over indebted, in terms of the National Credit Act, who's helped thousands of people to pay off their debt without losing their assets. But when people reach the point where they have to finance their food, it shows that there is problems.
Well, you know, there's the argument on the other side, Neil, is that people will probably choose, do you go hungry or do you get into debt? And I'm sure, you know, many people will, if they have kids, you know, you can't watch your family go hungry or starve. You'd rather put yourself in a little bit of debt. What are the options out there for hungry people rather than indebted people?
Well, the reality is that, let's say, for instance, somebody do finance their food for January. What would happen in February? They would have to finance it again, and the same with March and April. So they will just fall deeper and deeper into the debt trap and never come out of the debt trap. The reality is that you cannot afford to, or you cannot borrow your way out of debt. Now, also, the credit providers have to make sure that their consumers will be in a position to pay back the loans. And the reality is that if you cannot afford to pay for your living goods and you have to finance that, then by default you cannot afford to get a loan and to pay back a loan. The reality is that there is help out there. People must make use of that help rather than to borrow more money, especially to pay for living goods. Well,
a lot of people saying, and we've thrown this out to our viewers this morning, as you've heard, a lot of people saying, yes, it is a debt trap. And some people saying, well, it's not a bad idea. You have other stores like Woolworths who do it already. People are buying mostly food on those accounts. I mean, is it not ultimately left up to the consumer to use it responsibly then? Or is that just doesn't happen? It's not human nature?
Well, unfortunately, it's not human nature, and that's what we see on a daily basis at Debt Rescue, because when people find themselves in those situations where they have to finance food, then the reality is they take out more and more unsecured loans. Now, unfortunately, credit providers do give out these loans quite easily because the risk for them are lower than, for instance, giving out secured loans like home loans and vehicle finance. So it's quite easy to get these debt, and if something goes wrong, for instance, if a consumer say that this debt has been given to them recklessly, then a credit provider can just write it off. So it's quite easy to give out this debt, where a credit provider must actually make sure 100% that this consumer is in a position to pay back the money. Now, with regards to Woolworths already giving out these loans, it's a slightly different market. It's Woolworths cater for a little bit higher income consumer, so to basically give the message to lower income and middle income consumers that it's okay to borrow money for food. It's definitely not the right.
Well, I'm not sure how this is going to work, because just looking at the information is that Pick n Pay is going to use its Smart Shopper card or rewards program to decide. I'm not sure how that will work. Do you have any idea? Any clarity on how they will choose?
No, but the reality is that they would obviously try and make sure that their consumers will be able to pay back the money. The reality is just that we're giving the wrong message. We're telling people that it's okay to borrow money for food, in essence to finance your food, and that doesn't send the right message, firstly, and secondly, that would, in my opinion, cause more people to become over indebted than it will help.
Because it's not once-off. It's not a once-off purchase. It's not like buying a dining room set.
Exactly. If you start with that, you have to continue with that.
And I mean, but all credit, and just to be clear, I mean, credit is not necessarily a bad thing. Not all credit is bad.
No, definitely not.
Because you do need sometimes also to have some sort of credit to qualify for other things. Am I right? I mean, I'm not the cleverest person about these things, but just explain what you can and should be buying on credit and what's a bad idea, like food.
Well, you definitely get good credit, like home loans and things like vehicle finance. How are you going to afford to buy a vehicle without financing it? So that is why we have these finance, and it's been around for a lot of years. But the reality is that with regards to food and clothes and these kind of things, living essential goods, it's never a good idea to finance that, because like you said, if you start with that, you would have to continue with that and finance that every month, and you will never be able to reach a point where you pay off that money.
That makes sense. Thank you very much for that explanation. Debt Rescue CEO Neil Roots with us on Morning News today.
Well, this whole topic of buying food on credit has been the topic of our viewer question this morning. We asked you earlier your thoughts on buying groceries on credit.
Yes, we heard what Neil had to say. Let's hear what you have to say about it. Jeffrey says, during an economic downturn, people have clothing cards, whereas the most paramount needs are not taken care of. I think it's a good idea.
And then Benny says, bad idea. It puts more pressure on consumers.
Gift says this is not good at all. Simply.
That's short and sharp. Eh? Vincent says it's both a very good and bad idea. Very good for the store, bad for our people.
Lungelo says it will make poor people poorer. Debt makes people poor and frustrated.